Welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is Cris Carter. He's in the Hall of Fame, so we call him Hall of Famer Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright. How you doing, Nick?
Good to see you, Jenna Wolfe. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Great
Fun
weekend. I had a great weekend.
Perfect. Cris hosted the entire staff at his house to watch some basketball.
Yeah.
I was able to segue right as you were leaving.
Is that
so
when you got there?
We just missed each other.
Oh, because that wasn't strategically
I just missed
planned.
the timing.
Is that why Cece said, tell me exactly which game you're going to be coming for, Jenna, and at what time?
I couldn't watch the Cavs game with you, Jenna Wolfe. I heard you were in rare form yesterday, even for you.
I don't even know what that means.
She had a few new Jenna doing Jenna type things
yes.
on a Sunday in Tribeca.
If anyone wants to invite me over, you'll see another side of Jenna, a fun side of Jenna that I don't always get to show on the show.
And I know before
way more fun than Nick during the Cavs.
I am sure.
And listen, I know we got to get to it, but if you, and I know people usually don't watch for 3 full hours, but if you tune in again during the 3rd hour of the show, you'll find out what Jenna Wolfe stole from Cris Carter's house. So that's coming up later in the show as well. Little tease for later on.
Besides his dignity?
Okay,
probably
yes.
nothing.
Oh, wow. Wow, good morning. Good Monday morning. Dignity lost.
It was never supposed to come down to a Game 7. In fact, some called round 1 against the Pacers. Well, just a warm-up for round 2. Instead, Indiana played the Cavs tough right to the end. You know, the part that ruined the spread for most people. But when LeBron is averaging 34 points a game, it's just not going to be enough. Last night, the guy does it again. He had 45 points, 9 boards, 7 assists in the win. Wasn't easy, but the Cavs are moving on. Cece, how was LeBron able to lead this team over the Pacers? And we're not saying how are the Cavs able to do it. How was LeBron able to do it?
Like LeBron said, not true to character, where he's going to let his teammates get the game started. He's going to get into the flow of the game, try to get them off early. He said the doctor ordered for him to start fast, especially offensively. And I think with this cast of guys who, for the most part, outside the starting lineup, which they did, which I believe they made a huge transition into what has worked for us in the past. Regardless, we know we have injuries. They went to guys who were familiar with each other, helped them get off to a great start, helped LeBron. He was very, very aggressive offensively. And then later on, 3rd, 4th quarter, LeBron said, let the role players, while I'm taking some rest. I think he might have been cramped up a little bit, and the role players are able to come through. I think that combination, compared to what LeBron typically likes to do, let the role players start it. Let's try to get Kevin Love off. No, LeBron said, I'm going to start it fast. And then, as the game went on, the role players made contributions that were vital to the Cavs getting the win.
Listen, the role players had a critical 3-minute stretch at the start of the 4th quarter, but up until that, it had looked like the whole series had looked. Going into the 3rd quarter, there had been 5 baskets made by the Cavs. Going into the 4th quarter, pardon me, through 3 quarters. 5 baskets made by the Cavs that LeBron did not score or assist on. Cavs not named LeBron. 5. Cavs not named LeBron James or Tristan Thompson going into the 4th quarter were 7 of 34 from the field. That's 21%. So how did the Cavs win? Because at this point, the one thing we can rely on in sports is LeBron James in an elimination game. Like, the Spurs don't win 50 games every year anymore. Undertaker lost at WrestleMania a few years ago. Rafael Nadal lost on clay in the French Open a few years. Like, I guess the Patriots winning the AFC East and LeBron being out of this world in elimination games are things you just know are going to happen. And that's what it was again last night. It speaks to what we have come over this series, not over this season, but over this series, to expect from his teammates, that when the second leading scorer has 15 points, and when those numbers that I laid out through 3 quarters are true, that we can come out of it and say, you know what? LeBron actually got some help. We talked about it yesterday, where we're at with evaluating Kevin Love. That Kevin Love, you say, I thought Love actually played pretty well. And then you look, he had 14 points and 6 rebounds.
Jenna and I looked at each other during the game in the 4th quarter. Kevin Love made a bucket, and we're like, oh, people are cheering. Wow, we've changed our standard for Kevin Love. I mean, he gets to 14 points. You're like, wow, he really did well. But where LeBron got the most important help was from, no one could imagine this, Tristan Thompson.
Yeah, man.
I mean, his ability to play 34 minutes and play with the type of energy that we're used to seeing, 5 of 6 from the field. He's the second leading scorer. First of all, you can't sell anyone that, oh, Tristan's going to play how many minutes? 34 minutes. He's going to start. Play 34 minutes, get 15 and 10, you'll be like, no, that's not going to happen. If those things happen, then typically LeBron James is going to win.
You didn't watch that game and say, okay, well, at least we know who the other role players are going to be moving on to the next series. You didn't watch that game and say, finally, we're starting to see the other guys step up, and this is going to be a much more evenly matched second round. What you did see was LeBron do what LeBron does, which is play as much as he possibly could to give 100% of what he could. What you also saw was that it finally caught up to LeBron a little. We think that when he left at the end of the third, it was because he was having some cramps. He had to go into the locker room, come out at the start of the quarter. It affected him. He was tired. We saw that yesterday. It like physically affected him. How many more games can he single-handedly take this team and say, I got it, guys. You literally need to do nothing?
Well, up until that moment, LeBron was the first guy in 5 years in a Game 7 to play the first 35 minutes of the game. Like, this is the new standard LeBron has set, to where he says to his family in the second row during the first quarter, I'm playing the whole game. And we all were like, oh, yeah, of course. Okay, so LeBron's going to play 48 minutes. That doesn't happen. No. Guys don't play 48 minutes.
No, it's impossible to play 48 minutes and play at a high level.
Right.
Like, he couldn't.
He couldn't. He still played 44. But the idea that when he said that, the broadcast, folks on Twitter, myself, I think most people were like, oh, okay. So unless it's a blowout at the end, LeBron's not coming out of the game, we take it for granted how absurd that is. Does anyone have any idea how many minutes Victor Oladipo plays? Does anyone have any idea how many minutes Kevin Love or Miles? No, we're not counting minutes for these other guys. But LeBron's to a place to where him coming out of the game because he was slightly cramping was almost controversial. It was almost like, oh, he called it a minor injury after the game. Like, what's wrong with LeBron? What's wrong? Like, the guy, contrary to what he might show in some nights, is human. And, like, he was exhausted after carrying the team for those 3 quarters, which is why those 3 minutes without him were so critical. George Hill gets fouled on the 3. Kevin Love, after airballing a shot, makes a couple. Like, those 3 minutes, they could have been down 11 when LeBron came back into the game, and then it's a totally different story.
Let me tell you when he wasn't human. That was in those first 24 minutes. Because the Cavs don't advance. They are not continuing to play basketball. Today, they're either golfing, fishing, or whatever they decide to do in the offseason. If he doesn't come out and take the initiative, especially from an offensive standpoint, Kevin Love, you cannot depend on him. Tristan Thompson, man, we talked about those 15 points, Jenna. That was like finding money on the subway.
I know.
So how can we continue to go on and LeBron continue to, with all the pressure and everyone thinking or hoping, man, is this going to be the time that he doesn't do it? And he still comes through. Man, he was so poised. To me, he was so poised under pressure early. I mean, because this is the worst team that he's taken into the playoffs. I'd be willing to debate people
easily
which team was worse than this, especially a team that was not elite defensively. His first time in Cleveland, that was one of the big differences between this team and those teams with the elite defense that they played his first tenure in Cleveland.
And I can't believe I'm saying this, but that 07 team at least had Boobie Gibson, who could get you a few points off the dribble. Like, to your point, like, who's getting them points off the dribble? I know Jordan Clarkson's trying to, and Jordan Clarkson had a good 3-minute stretch, and I think it was Game 4 or Game 3, but since then has not been seen. But I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. The last time LeBron James played poorly in an elimination game was the final game of the Dallas Mavericks series. Like, I just want to show the audience what the numbers are. He's played 13 games. 13 games where it's win or go home. He's 10-3, giving you 36, 12, and 7.
Wow.
Go ahead, Jenna.
I guess my point is, it shouldn't have had to come down to an elimination game because, and wrongfully so, when we started talking about this series, we were talking about the Pacers as almost a practice round for them to move forward. Had one other guy stepped up, one other guy that LeBron could have said, okay, I know I have a second option here, or someone that if I did take a breather, I know that the team's in good hands. You can't look at this series and say, all right, we see one guy that stepped up. He's the only other guy that's sort of dependable. We thought maybe it was Kyle Korver, maybe it would be Kevin Love, maybe it would be Clarkson. It's not any of those guys.
No, you go into the Eastern Conference semifinals with more questions than after a 7-game series that you had with the Pacers. And let's not forget, because the question was, how did they win? We talked about LeBron, we talked about Tristan, we talked about Kevin Love having that burst there they needed in the fourth. But They bring a guy off the bench, George Hill, who I believe was not going to play in the game. I believe he was made available before the game, but he hadn't played since game 3. But if they don't get those 19 minutes from George Hill, if they don't get a couple of those rebounds, if they don't get those free throws from George Hill, we're talking about a different outcome today. So these are the things that we don't know about going against Toronto into the second round. Is George Hill going to be available? Right. Is Kevin Love, what Kevin Love is going to show up? Or now are they going to go back with Tristan? Now is he back into the starting lineup? So still a lot of questions surrounding the case.
George Hill being out for 3 games was an underrated storyline throughout the series. He was obviously critical for them in that fourth quarter stretch and gave them critical minutes because they don't trust Rodney Hood. They don't trust Jordan Clarkson. So all of a sudden that bench is getting shorter and shorter. What I'll say is this, they went that entire series without a single player not named LeBron scoring 20 points. The Phoenix Suns wouldn't do that. So as far as will the complementary players play better, there's one question to say, will they play enough? Will they play better than they played in this series? I think it's almost impossible for them to play worse.
All right, we're going to take a break there. Coming up, the Cowboys said goodbye to Dez. Guess who else is on his way out of Dallas? Maybe next on First Things First. Talk some Cowboys. If I told you there was a guy on the Cowboys roster who's overpaid, whose skills have declined, and who may not be back next season, you would say, I know, Jenna, Dez Bryant. But we might also be talking about Jason Witten.
Ooh.
Well, Dez is gone, and now Witten, the 15-year tight end, is reportedly considering retirement, more than likely to call Monday Night Football. So head coach Jason Garrett woke up, realized he might go from having 2 aging receivers to none, and is now trying to convince Witten to return for 1 more season. Chris Carter, will there be enough offense left if Witten does, in fact, leave after they already cut Dez Bryant from this roster?
I'm a Jason Witten fan, but not at 36. There was a couple things Dallas needed to do going into this offseason. They need to get more speed on their offense. They need to get more speed at the tight end, more speed at the wide receiver. So for me, I look at it as a tremendous opportunity. Now, the timing might not be perfect for the Cowboys, right, but to me, this is an opportunity because we've seen this with other tight ends. Antonio Gates, he still wants to play. San Diego's not going to sign this. We saw that. I've seen this with the other great tight ends. At the end, because they're legacy tight ends, you give them that extra year because, let's just let him finish up. We saw that with Gonzalez. We saw that with a number of other guys, and I believe Jason Witten is in that same class. Well beyond his prime, doesn't have speed, never was a speed tight end, came into the league at the combine. I think he ran 4.65. Now, that was a young kid at 22. Now he's going to be 36 later on in May. So, no, I think this is a great opportunity for the Cowboys that they can get an influx of speed into their lineup. I believe that they should take advantage of it.
Listen, I think the Cowboys offense can be fine, if not better, without Jason Witten. And I can explain that in a moment. But I want to talk about the timing just for a second because you alluded to it, Chris. This strikes me as the type of thing where Jason Witten, and maybe this is how it should go in life, Jason Witten's cachet, the credibility he has built up as a good guy, as a leader, as a good teammate, is buying him a lot of rope on the timing of this. Because if Jason Witten were considered a diva wide receiver instead of team leader tight end, announcing this or letting this come out right after they cut Dez Bryant, who, if they don't think Jason Witten's coming back, maybe they think there's one less personality conflict in the locker room, one more need for a veteran on receiving threat. And then after the first round of the draft, when the Cowboys were in position to draft Hayden Hurst and instead draft Leighton Vander Esch. I don't know if they would have drafted him, but you want as much information as early as possible. Like, Cece, do you think the Cowboys potentially would have made a different decision on Dez Bryant if Jason Witten a month ago they went to Witten to restructure his deal, and he says yes, which makes it actually a worse cap hit for them this year, cutting him than playing him, or than him playing, or him retiring than him playing. So a month ago they thought he was playing, he thought he was playing. What do you make of the timing of this?
When the Dallas intel, it told the coaches and the front office, we're going to get off of Dez Bryant. But if they had gone into the offseason saying, we're going to get off of Dez Bryant and Jason Witten, they would have had a different approach as far as free agency. Now, what if they were split on it? Because both of them are going to be departing, that they said, oh, you know something? We want to keep some leadership around, so we'll keep Dez. I'm not overly concerned about that because they wouldn't even let Dez stay with a reduced salary. So for me, they were moving off of Dez Bryant. Just their whole approach as far as free agency would have been different. If they didn't have Witten already in the fold, maybe the Sammy Watkins opportunity that they have to go in a little bit deeper to try to secure someone like Sammy Watkins. I just believe that their roster, as it stands today, is totally different if they know.
And maybe the availability to go get Jimmy Graham, who was available. And they haven't had a dynamic pass-catching tight end, that type of tight end, in quite some time. Now, what it does to the team on the field, with Dez gone and with Witten gone, this is now Dak and, to a lesser extent, Zeke's team. Those are the veteran leaders on the skill position players, unless it can be an offensive lineman's team, which I'm not familiar with. Like, it's the quarterback's team, if it wasn't already, and the best skill position player and the most influential skill position player is not Dez because he's gone, is not Witten because he's gone. It's certainly not Allen Hurns, who's new. It's not Cole Beasley. It's Ezekiel Elliott.
As a receiving group, though, excuse me, Jenna, as a receiving group, though, you start looking at groupings on the team: defensive front, offensive line, secondary, linebackers, running backs. The weakest group they have is their group of pass catchers. So if the Dallas is going to be a playoff team, this group is going to have to play well. And who are going to be the guy? Who's their leading receiver today? I don't know. Who's their second threat? I don't know. Who's going to be their starting tight end? I don't know. And that ain't no good thing to be on TV talking about I don't know. Because the Dallas Cowboys, if they were being honest, they don't know.
Right. They don't know.
But we can't talk about whether Jason Witten leaves or not as what's going to either save the Cowboys or not. It's not like Witten had some sort of fantastic year. He's coming off career lows in catches and yards last season anyway. He wasn't a huge pivotal part of that Dallas Cowboys offense, but now they just may need to find someone completely different.
Dallas has always been a little short on leadership. His value is not, oh, man, what's he going to do?
Yeah.
How many balls is he going to catch?
Okay.
His leadership to that young team, because Zeke, is he ready to be the leader? Dak trying to figure out the game, man.
Yeah.
Before you trying to tell him to be this great leader, he's trying to figure out the passing part of it. Now, a lot of that will go back on that offensive line, Tyron Smith being healthy, their ability to be able to dominate, but the running back and the quarterback, they're going to have to step up their leadership role going into year 3.
Cowboys were bottom 5 in the league last year in yards after catch. That didn't do Dak any favors. We know that Dez was 88th in the league in yards after catch, and Jason Witten was near the bottom amongst all tight ends in yards after catch. The one silver lining is whomever they replace them with, they might have a little more explosion, a little more fast twitch. But the question is, are they good enough players?
All right, let's take a break. Coming up, will SHAQUEM Griffin be able to make an immediate impact on the Seahawks? It is a great story, an inspirational story. We'll tell it to you next on First Things First. And finally, the Cavs took down the Pacers 105-101 yesterday to take Game 7. Cleveland was carried by LeBron's 45 points. Cleveland was high-fived by Tristan Thompson's 15. It was Ty Lue's 34th different starting lineup this season. Nick, how crucial was the lineup change for the Cavs in Game 7?
Man, once you saw what Rodney Hood had for him, nothing but fright. Once you saw what Jordan Clarkson had for him, nothing but some of the worst possessions you can imagine. Once you saw what Jeff Green had for him, not much. Larry Nance, you say, oh, I see why they did what they did. And it made me think of a point Chris Broussard made last week, which was when we talk about playoff experience, we need to recognize if a player is a special, transcendent talent. Because for those guys, playoff experience doesn't much matter. Donovan Mitchell, how about a 22-point third quarter and carrying his team in a Game 6 win? Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. Those guys are special talents. But if you're not one of those cream of the crop guys, guess what you need? Some damn playoff experience. So JR, every single person that started for the Cavs yesterday, the 4 guys on the team that had won a title with them, plus Kyle Korver, who was on the finals team last year. Listen, guys, we know you won't be scared. We know the moment won't be too big for you, because thus far it's been too big for Hood, too big for Nance, too big for Clarkson, and the guy that came off the bench that played the best for him, George Hill, guess what he got? Some legitimate playoff experience.
And they did the right thing by not starting George Hill. If he could only play a limited number of minutes, don't run him out there, especially with back spasms, because once you start him up, you know, you can't sit him down and they'll bring him out. So most of those minutes, he played in the second half. I believe that was a smart move. The lineup change, knowing that you're not going to start George Hill, I thought was critical because they do have confidence playing together. But that doesn't mean anything. They tip that ball off. If LeBron and they don't start good, if they don't have that 12-point lead at the end of that first quarter, if they don't have that home crowd, because the crowd played a huge part in this victory also. This was, I think, the loudest Cleveland crowd has been. The crowd sensed it that they needed them. So now going to halftime up by double digits, first quarter by 12, I think those first 24 minutes were very, very important from a confidence standpoint.
CC, and this morning, Jenna brought up an amazing point. I had said it was the 34th different starting lineup, and you said that the Cavs played like 4,200 minutes this year together as a team. How many minutes had that five-man starting lineup? Minutes. How many minutes had that five-man starting lineup played going into that game?
3 minutes.
3
minutes the starting five played.
Had played 3 minutes on the court as a unit the whole season, those 5 guys. And they start them in a game 7.
And I think LeBron wanted them to start. LeBron wanted to have some playoff experience around him. I've been trying to wrap my head around this Cleveland Cavs team because I sit next to you every day, because we talk about it so much, and because the greatest basketball player playing today plays for this team. But in so doing, I've been so confused because the start of every single game, it is a different starting lineup out there. It is a different group of guys that Ty Lue is trying to somehow find a way to make work, and it just doesn't. They keep winning, but for whatever reason, they can't find a starting 5. I wonder if the 5 we saw last night will now maybe be the 5 heading into the next round.
Well, it's really hard to go to a lineup that you don't have a lot of video success. It wasn't like when they went to the coaches meeting, Ty Lue and the staff, and any coach that's with LeBron never gets any type of credit, but every great athlete needs coaching, needs direction. LeBron did not come up with this lineup. This is Ty Lue and the coaching staff coming up with this, and it was like they were grabbing for it because there's not a lot of video evidence. How, as a coaching staff, do you go to this team and be like, here you go, guys, I'm going to show you a bunch of good basketball where you guys played together? It was a gut feeling. He went with it, especially Tristan Thompson. He's been, since the incident he had off the court, he's been getting booed at home. He hadn't played 30-something minutes in this whole series. No. For Ty Lue to go to that in the most critical game, because if it doesn't work, he's going to get fired today, or he's going to get fired soon after they lose. So that lineup change, that was outstanding, and people need to give him and that coaching staff more credit for going to that.
You mentioned Tristan getting booed. Just quick note before we move on. When he checked out of the game after giving them amazing energy in that first quarter, Larry Nance, who's a guy who I'm sure would have liked to be in the starting lineup, Larry Nance prodded the crowd, the home crowd who had booed him, saying, stand up and cheer for this guy, because he was excellent in that first quarter and set the tone with the second chance points, with the hustle points, with the post defense.
All right, let's talk about the NFL draft this weekend. So many great stories coming out of it. By far the most inspirational, that of SHAQUEM Griffin. SHAQUEM lost his left hand at the age of 4 and yet still managed to not only play football, but to play well enough to earn a coveted spot in the National Football League. Shaq was drafted in the 5th round by the Seattle Seahawks. You know who else plays for the Seahawks? SHAQUEM's twin brother. CC, how do you think he'll fit in with this Seattle team? And you could just see part of that incredible emotion right there.
He's going to fit in great, because there's no team that has a locker room quite like Seattle, and that meaning the personality. A part of one of their mantras as a team is, we're not trying to change whatever your character is, whatever your personality is. We're trying to enhance whatever we see the good parts in that. Whatever your personality is, we want you to be that person, but we just want you to be the best version of that. It's also a very young and competitive environment where they've been fined by the players, by the league. They've been written up by the Players Association of having too strenuous practices, competing too much. That is one of Pete Carroll's. That's one of his calling cards. John Snyder. They don't waste draft picks on talented players. I mean, if you look at the draft capital that they spent on some of their best players in the history of the team, look at where they came from. And for me, I was first-team All-America. I'm not part of this story, but I was first-team All-America in Ohio State. I was drafted in the 4th round. They spent the 5th-round pick on this kid. It wasn't like there was just, some good, feel-good story. Their ability to tackle the football, They have this thing called hawk tackling that they invented, their coaching staff. Pete Carroll's embraced it. The NFL has changed their tackling with hawk tackling. Well, what is it? It removes the head from tackling, a lot like Australian rules football, so you have to get a lot closer to the player. It's a lot like SHAQUEM plays football, because with the lack of a hand, he can't grab and clutch like other guys can. So he utilizes speed to get close.
It's like you described it. It's like how almost a crocodile drowns you. Like they grab you and they spin.
And they coil and wrap their body around you using your arms and your legs to be able to get you to the ground. He also has to play in a defense that's going to be foreign to him. He's got his brother in the same defensive room explaining it to him. What about lodging as a rookie? Because it's NFL locker room it's brutal. I don't care if you get drafted #1 like Baker Mayfield. It's brutal because they're grown men and they know these draft picks have come in to take their job. But because he's got a brother there to help him explain things, there's so many benefits. I can go on and on. What about his family? Now they only got to go to one place. They would have to been split up. One's got to go see his brother play. One's got to be able to support him. So there's so many things that I can tell you that will lead to him being successful in Seattle, that this was the absolute best place for him to end up in the NFL.
We shouldn't discount the off-the-field stuff. He doesn't have to look for an apartment in the beginning. He can live with his brother. He doesn't have to learn, all right, so when they say be there at 7 a.m., do they really mean 7? Ask his brother. When he's in the meeting room, as you were telling me yesterday, and they use totally different terminology, he doesn't have to, who do I ask? What do I ask his brother?
Him and his brother played on the same defense at UCF.
And that bond, I know a lot of people that have a twin will say that is a special bond that non-twins don't understand. People should know not his big brother.
They don't have a bond like these twins.
The other twin, the one that went earlier, a couple years ago in the draft, had better offers to other bigger schools than UCF and turned them down because they wouldn't take his brother. He went to the best school that would take both of them. But the other point that you referenced there, which is the draft capital, which is I want football fans to know, yes, this is a feel-good story. But it's not just a feel-good story for Shaq. It's a feel-good story for the Seahawks. The Seahawks drafted Richard Sherman in the 5th round. Yeah. You think they're doing some pick for charity? This isn't. They got Marshawn Lynch by trading a 4th-round pick. They're not throwing these picks
Russell
away.
Wilson
in the 3rd round. And the point you brought up yesterday that I'd never considered is if you are somewhere on the roster between guy 40 and the whole practice squad, so to guy 60, how much harder he's going to make you work. Like the examples you gave on kickoff coverage, see, and you can expand on it, but yesterday when we were talking about this, he's like, can you imagine if you're on kickoff coverage and you're getting beat by the guy with one hand? Hey, can you imagine if you're saying, Coach, I might need a break. My wrist is sprained. And you see the guy out there who with one hand, like what it will do as far as the competition for an organization that fosters it as well as any organization in football, that competition when you have this guy out there.
Because what it does is it allows him to walk in on day one focused on football. And for a lot of these other guys, they walk in on day one, they're focused on 1,400 things, as we've learned from you. And maybe number 800 would be actual football. And now he can actually come in and do the one thing. And I would imagine that once this story passes, he doesn't want to be known as the guy with one hand that plays for the Seattle Seahawks. He wants to fit in and just be one of the guys at some point, I would imagine.
What did he say about that?
He said it wants to be about overcoming obstacles. He mentioned that in his interview, Jen. That's a good point. He mentioned that I don't want this to be a feel-good story. I don't want this to be the end with, the kid with one hand. He said, no, this is about overcoming tremendous obstacles for all people, and that's what he looks to be able to do. It's so amazing, for me and the National Football League to be able to embrace someone who has not a handicap, not a disability. He just has one less hand than everyone else who's ever played this game. And I always go over the numbers. 22,000 of us ever played this game. Only 11,000 of us have played more than 4 years. And to have him be the first person to have this type of disability and be able to play and be drafted by the Seattle Seahawks. Because, Nick, you mentioned it. His brother sacrificed for him. But, man, did it come back. When John Snyder, they don't only believe in they believe in the brothers, they believe in the family, but they went out on a limb to draft this kid to put him with his brother. Man, what a phenomenal story, and it really speaks to Pete Carroll and his legacy. He got rid of Richard Sherman. We know about Bennett. Bennett, he didn't want to be there. Now he's got this young group of enthusiasm built to come back into that locker room. I'm excited to see what Seattle is going to do with him, what position he's going to play, because I just believe from a defensive standpoint, he won't be a defensive back. He's not big, he's more of a liability in the defensive coverage than he is rushing. So he'll be in sub packages rushing the quarterback with all the speed and the rushers they have. I'm excited to see what role he carves out for himself.
From a football perspective, the hawk tackling thing can't be undersold. The way this team practices can't be undersold. From a football perspective, for Seattle, if there's never a story written about him, if no one ever talks about him again, it makes their team better. But just from a human perspective, there might not be another person with only one hand play in the National Football League for 50 years. But his impact on young people who see it, who aren't going to be pro football players, but they might be peewee football players.
Yep.
They might be high school football players.
Cheerleaders.
Might get a college scholarship, cheerleaders, whatever it is. Man, that is real. And I think he went to the perfect spot for him. We don't get a lot of these all-around amazing feel-good stories that also there's no charity involved. It's just for all the reasons it was the right thing. This is one of those.
I'm proud, as a former Walter Payton, we do a lot of charity. But we don't do no charity with that draft.
I was just going to say, this isn't a charity case.
No, we don't do no charity with that draft.
And he doesn't want it to be a
those draft picks
charity
are
case.
very, very valuable.
That's a good point. All right, let's take a break. Coming up, more draft coverage. Can Swann Walker make the Giants a contender in the NFC East? That's next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. We're joined by my favorite guest, head coach Eric Mangini.
What up, Coach?
Former head
Good
coach.
to
How
see
you
you.
doing?
I'm great.
He's your favorite guest. He's not even my favorite Mangini we've had on the show anymore.
It's a good point that we've had multiple Manginis. That being said,
His son stole the show last week.
Please tell your son he caused an uproar with my staff.
Yes, it's
Why's
true.
that?
Oh, they're so jealous.
Yeah.
How did little Mangini get on?
Oh,
top?
yeah.
Couldn't
believe it.
Deontay wants to get on set.
Now they want to walk out and give us papers and everything with nothing on it.
Yeah, they're like, why don't we have a producer cam if Mangini's kid can get on? He's the most talented of the lot, guys.
He is, and if you want to see, I don't know if you want him to follow you. I liked little Mangini's clip on Instagram.
Yeah, we'll
we
keep
talked
that
about
space limited.
Yeah, sorry about that. When I started the sentence, I didn't know where to go, so I had no choice but to finish the sentence.
Keep my 14-year-old out of that world if I can.
Coach, you're right. My apologies to you. That was
And Jenna
my
also
bad.
said if little Mangini slide into his DM,
Okay.
that's what he needs at 14.
That I did not say. All right, let's move on so fast now. The 3 steps to any NFL draft go like this. Step 1, mock draft the player. Step 2, draft the player. Step 3, have drafter's remorse and hope you made the right decision getting said player. It is the Monday after the draft, and we are up to Step 3. For the Giants, that means wondering if drafting Swann Walker and not a quarterback to replace Eli Manning was the best decision. There are big expectations on the former Penn State running back who will help the Giants bounce back from a very disappointing season. Swann says he's ready.
I think the face of the franchise is kind of how you take it, and I know that's been said about me, and that's been said about me in college with at college with Penn State, but I think it's kind of how you view it. I really never view myself as a face of the franchise. When you have success, that tag comes along. That's how I kind of view it. The more success you have, the more attention, the more spotlight comes to your name, and they kind of tag you with that. But that's not something that I'm really looking forward to be. If that happens, God willing, I have a lot of success, and that comes to the territory, then so be it.
All right, Coach, let's talk about what the Giants need out of Swann. He could do one of two things. He could come in the same way Ezekiel Elliott came into the Dallas Cowboys and have immediate impact minus the 6 games, and then eventually he had to leave. Or, he could kind of come in slowly. But with Eli Manning where he is, you sort of are hoping that Swann comes in and makes that immediate impact very quickly next season.
Yeah, and they didn't do him too many favors by setting the expectations so high and saying he's been touched by the hand of God. I think that's a little bit tougher when you bring a player in with those type of accolades from the front office. But I like this pick, and I think it was the right decision. It didn't seem like they loved any of the young quarterbacks. To bring in Swann, who is a great character guy, a player that seems humble. It's a nice counterbalance to some of the other personalities that they've had in New York, and I think that's the tone that they're trying to set. That's the direction they're trying to head. And now if he can have anywhere close to the production that Ezekiel had his first year, now 322 carries, 1,600 and some odd yards, 5.1 yards a carry, that's going to be hard to
1,000 yards on first down.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to get there, but now that opens up so many things for Eli. Eli's really good off of play action, so if they have to deal with the running game, to me, this is a good pick for a lot of reasons if the player is as close to as good as they feel he is.
Yeah, if we're going to compare him to the best backs, that being Ezekiel, that being L. Bell, and very, very familiar outside of L. Bell only going in the second round, was that all of them played in the Big Ten. The thing that we knew about L. Bell and Ezekiel, though, we knew they can carry the ball 25, 30 times. Like, we knew they could carry the whole university. Like, we knew in given games. Saquon, we don't know that about him. Like, that's the one thing about Penn State. Great kid, great character. They said the cleanest prospect, potentially the best player in this year's draft. But when the weather changes, can he carry the ball 25, 30 times? We knew Zeke could do that. We saw him do that against Alabama and other players. At Penn State, they didn't ask him to do this. So that's something that we don't know. As Coach said, I love the expectations that they have for him within the franchise, and I love his overall demeanor. He talked about, I'm not going to be the face of the franchise, compared to typically people in this spot, when they ask him that question, they would just fall for it and be like, well, yes, I guess I am. He says, no, that comes with productivity. It doesn't come with a draft position. So I think he's going to be a star in the league. But the one thing he don't have that Zeke had, man, he don't have that offensive line with 3 Pro Bowlers. He don't have that type of offensive line. This is probably the biggest question mark on the Giants roster, is their offensive line, and who will be the pieces in front of him. So I believe he will be a great player. I believe he'll have a tremendous impact out of the backfield for their passing game immediately.
And you look at what they have done with the offensive line. They went out and got Nate Soldier. They drafted Will Hernandez in the second round. They signed a couple other free agent offensive linemen, so they're trying to address that. And if they do have Odell back and he's healthy, you've got a star on the outside who can put pressure on the passing game, and now you've got a guy like this who can put real pressure, home run pressure, in the running game. And I think Eli can still play at a very high level, especially with compliments like that. So I agree with you, though, Chris. How well is he going to do with the cold weather? How well is he going to do going up inside where it's noisy, game in and game out, having to carry that load?
Well, and you mentioned 1,600 yards from Ezekiel Elliott his rookie season. That's a remarkable total. Like, we can't set that as a fair, he has to reach that standard. But I will say...
We can. When you're drafted number, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Sure. I think so let me tell you what I would set the standard at for him. What I would, I don't want to say projected, but what I would consider a really good start to his career. How about 1,500 yards from scrimmage? How about 1,500 combined receiving and rushing yards? Because I think he's going to be more of a receiving threat than Zeke was, where he's not going to be as much of a guarantee on 3rd and 2 to pick up the 3 yards you need. But I do think he's a guy who's going to take a few swing passes, a few halfback screens, and a guy that I can already see this play in my mind's eye, where you have Odell run a slant to try to sweep the defense to the left-hand side, and then he fills in that gap along the left-hand side against a linebacker. Like, I feel like we saw them try to do things like that at Penn State. Run the action away so he only has to beat one guy. That's where I think he's special. You're right. Too much is... He can't have 950 yards and say, oh, well, he's a rookie. Not when you're the number 2 pick. I understand that. I just don't think he's going to get his yards purely through the rushing game the way Zeke did.
One thing to look back on is look on Pat Sherman. He's the head coach. Look at what he did not only in Cleveland, but more importantly, what did he do last year with the Vikings? All right, the Vikings had questions at their quarterback. They had a promising rookie, Dalvin Cook, as a running back. Look how they utilized him. Look how they integrated him to the National Football League. Dalvin Cook, I would say, has a very similar skill set that Barkley has. Now, but Barkley's far more explosive and less question marks about him. So I think they will integrate him. I believe they will run him more between the tackles than he did at Penn State. So I'm looking forward to the transition, you know, from being a dominant running back in college football to being the lead runner for the New York Football Giants.
Coach, on Friday you talked about the I guess football parity, if you will, among the top couple guys that go, because you don't really know at this point how they're going to do skill-wise. The most important thing is how they're going to handle the position they've been given. They've been anointed to a certain place on a team. Personality-wise, are they ready for the market? Are they ready to be the face of a team, especially in your first 5 positions? Saquon Barkley seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders, and New York is not an easy place to be. There's a ton of media. I mean, you sneeze and they ask you 15 questions about it. Just talk to me a little bit about that transition and what that's like for him now over the course of the next couple weeks, months.
That's one of the reasons I like this pick so much is the human being that I've heard that he is. And a guy that I went to high school with was actually is at Penn State and was part of recruiting him, and couldn't say enough great things about this human being. And so when you come in with those expectations into a market like New York, and you sit back and say, I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can for this fan base, for this team. I'm going to sit back and learn. I'm going to do everything I can to make the Giants a winner. I think New Yorkers respect that. I think New Yorkers look at this person and say, okay, we are excited about cheering for you because of the things that you bring intangibly to
and he spent his whole career on the East Coast. He's born in New York, played at Penn State. Now, Penn State is not New York City, but he doesn't have the type of personality that I believe would drive him to the lights and the glamour of New York City like OBJ. Well, we didn't think that about OBJ either, coming from Louisiana until he got here either.
All right, Coach, stick around. We'll see you a little bit later in the show. Coming up, are the Golden State Warriors looking like runaway favorites in the West? Also runway favorites. They're both.
James Harden, that outfit belongs on a runway. And little Daisy Dukes he got on.
Welcome back to First Things First. We're now joined by NBA champ Swann Walker.
Good to see you,
Swann, how are you?
How are you, sir?
Swann, is this just your favorite time of the year? I mean, if you're not playing, it might as well be playoff basketball.
Yeah, it's tough because, I always like the NCAA time, too. But this is the best time.
Let me start up. Is this your second favorite time of the year? If you're not playing, at least you're watching playoff basketball. I nailed that one, guys. That's what I did there. All right, let's talk about it. Hey, remember that one time when we wondered how one of the best
should have been in the
teams
Final Four.
in basketball, the Warriors, would win without their best player, Steph Curry? And then also remember they cruised past the Spurs in round 1? Well, then we wondered how they'd fare without Steph in round 2. Well, more cruising. Warriors, Pelicans, game 1, Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant combined for 53 points. Draymond had a triple-double, and the Warriors won game 1 by 22 points. Steph who? However, Thompson did admit the Pelicans did present one problem.
It was tiring. Spurs, they're a little older, so they play a little more methodical. They try to beat us up in the half court in the low block. This team's like kind of playing ourselves. It's just you make a bucket, you can't relax. You got to sprint back. You got to find a shooter, and they're pushing the tempo. So it's a whole different ball game.
Klay looked at me there on the bench and said, "Man, Draymond, I got more tired tonight than I did in any game against the Spurs."
Yeah.
That just kind of sums it up.
These post-game press conferences are getting to be real fun with real good sound bites. Hey, Antoine, how were the Warriors able to dominate game 1 without Steph Curry?
Well, obviously their bench is better than New Orleans' bench, and that's why the second quarter was just a dominant performance from the bench. And you got to think about it. I don't know if New Orleans can really score 115 points every night, and that's probably the biggest problem. Can they score 114 points a night? You hear Klay Thompson talk about the speed they play with, but it's a big difference when they don't have the type of shooters that Golden State got. You can play fast, but you got to have some shooters. I think with New Orleans, they got to try to control the pace, make sure they have better tempo. You got to feature Anthony Davis more in the half-court set. You can't run up and down with Golden State if you don't have those type of shooters. So I think that's where the difference at, in the bench production for New Orleans is not very good. It's a tremendous drop-off from the starting lineup to the bench. And then, obviously, Golden State's bench is playing terrific.
On the bench side of it, we've said all the first round. The Pelicans got 4 guys you trust. They don't even have 5, not even a full starting lineup, because you don't really trust Etuan Moore. It's the Brow, Mirotic, and the guards, Holiday and Rondo. They need those guys to stay out of foul trouble. They need those guys to stay on the court. But what happened to me in game 1 was the Warriors played a triple-plus defense in the second and third quarters.
Yes.
The way they swarmed Anthony Davis, who got off to a quick start to open the first quarter, and then they limited him the rest of the way. They held the Pelicans to 40 points in those 2 quarters. When you consider the pace that they're playing, the number of possessions each team was generating, Holding them to 40 points in 2 quarters is remarkable. Draymond was playing peak Defensive Player of the Year, Draymond, and that's where they won the game. They won those 2 quarters by 28 points. That's what won them the basketball game. And the reality is this for the Pelicans, even without Steph Curry for the Warriors, they have no paths to victory that don't involve Anthony Davis having a monster game.
Yes.
21-10 needs to be a half for Anthony Davis in the games they're going to win. Like that, I mean, the Warriors, though, it's not because Anthony Davis was missing easy shots. The Warriors' defense was extraordinary, as well as you can possibly play.
Yeah, he's going to have to be dead on, though. He's going to have to be able to shoot the jump shot 17, 18 feet, because Anthony Davis is not a back-to-the-back basketball player. Right. He's not going to bag you down and jump hook you. LaMarcus Aldridge played mostly close to the back, so that's how he was able to dominate. Anthony Davis likes to shoot the 17-footer. He's going to catch some lobs. It's a different way he scores the basketball. And then also to add on top of that, you got to think about it. When Klay Thompson gets going from the outside, it makes it a whole different game, and they have zero. When I say, I mean zero person that can guard Kevin Durant. This is crazy.
Yeah, no one to guard Kevin Durant. They got Drew Holiday guarding him. So that right there, that matchup Golden State took. Klay's playing at a level, both ends of the court, that's going to be a problem. But I like the pacing because we saw in the first quarter, they got caught up into the playoff and the Warriors pacing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they said, man, 34 points. Only giving up 35, like, oh, we're in this game. But after that, the Warriors in their defense began to choke them out. The thing that I saw for the first time probably this playoff was the ball movement. It was the same type of ball movement that they had when Steph was in there. Well, how do they create the same ball movement in round 2 that they couldn't do in round number 1? Well, Iggy and Draymond played a lot better offensively. So it opened up the court. They got 28 points between the two of them. If you get that type of productivity between those two players,
you can't beat them.
Oh, no.
They become impossible. So even without Steph being on the court, their overall spacing because of the other shooters, but their calling card, defense. You give up 40 points in 2 quarters in the NBA, especially when they come out of halftime, which we know the Warriors, they always blitz you in that 3rd quarter. That defense right there is their calling card.
And just real quick, I want to build on something you said, because going into this series, I asked the question, who's guarding Anthony Davis? Like, are you going to have a big man out there to guard Anthony Davis? The question that was not asked enough was, who's guarding Kevin Durant? We know that no one in the league can shut down Kevin Durant, but there are guys, just like nobody can shut down LeBron, but there are guys that can give him trouble. The Pacers had a few guys that actually, like, you see the big bodies and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, they gave him trouble. Yeah, they would have got 65.
Okay, fair enough, but you know what I mean.
They can make it physically more taxing.
But to add to that, you got to have bodies. They don't. New Orleans don't have enough bodies to throw at Kevin Durant.
Yes.
Solomon
enough
Hill,
wing defenders.
Right. Solomon Hill came in off the bench, but then you're limited after that. Darius Miller's too small to guard him as well, so they don't have enough bodies to throw at him and kills him. And you got to give Steve Kerr a lot of credit too to adjust. I mean, he don't even play JaVale McGee. I was shocked.
Yeah, Kevon Looney played 24 minutes.
Yeah, JaVale McGee was unbelievable in the Spurs series, and he don't even play him.
Yeah, I thought the Pelicans had a chance. When I saw Nick Young out there on the court to start the game, I was like, goodness gracious, like they really have a chance, but they could never get to those matchups, especially the Pelicans. They couldn't get to the matchups where AD. I think they got to take a page from San Antonio to make an adjustment, make it more of a half-court game, and make AD play with his back to the basket, because then you don't get all those perimeter switching, where Golden State is really, really good at that.
And now the Warriors may be getting Steph back Tuesday. How much does that change for how the Pelicans are going to game plan this team?
I think it's more for Golden State, obviously trying to implement him back into the lineup, figuring out, how many minutes to play him, making sure that he's healthy, because you're looking for a longer run. I think he's going to play. I think you sit him Tuesday, you play him Friday.
Because they played this way, because you mentioned this during the break, because of how Game 1 went, you now would give Steph an extra game off because they don't play Game 3 till Friday, so you're effectively giving him an extra 4 days. You wouldn't play him Game 2.
Yeah, I just think in the playoffs, your others play better. And if you look at the way Golden State bench played in Game 1, David West stepping up, making shots. Obviously, Cook making some shots. Cook making some shots. So those guys play better at home. You get on the road, Steph Curry gives you that boost, that energy that you're going to need on the road. And then, obviously, you got to start getting some shape. He needs to starting to get himself into some basketball shape. So you got to bring him back soon.
All right, Antoine, thank you very much. We'll see you a little bit later in the show. Coming up, any chance the Celtics upset the Sixers this series? This will be a good one. Next on First Things First.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.